Hello and welcome to this special conversation. Today we're talking about an extremely engaging and beautiful read. It's a book called The Earthspinner, and it's been authored by an award-winning novelist, Anuradha Roy. Interesting because of the many myriad shades the book has in it. It looks at immigration, prejudice, art, love, so much rolled into one. Anuradha, of course, is the author of many other acclaimed books: An Atlas of Impossible Longing, The Folded Earth, Sleeping on Jupiter, just some of the names of the books that she's authored. And she joins me now to talk about this very special and this newest read by her. Super. Thank you, Anuradha, for joining in and speaking with me. And congratulations on this beautiful book.
Thank you.
Both visually and the read. And I mean, I was reading some reviews before our conversation today, and I loved how everyone highlighted the fact that, you know, when you bring it down to its core, it's pottery and dogs, which I think is such a wonderful combination while writing. Tell me how the two sort of mesh together for you.
I think it started for me with the pottery part of it, because I had a sense of this character and of the dream he has of making a gigantic clay horse. And it was a kind of image that kept coming back to me. And it was something I needed to write in order to explain it for myself, in a sense. And then there was this whole idea of it's always frightened me that we have 3 dogs. And I've always been frightened by the thought of one of them getting lost. This is a perennial terror dog owners have, or anyone who has an animal, because they fear not so much death as not knowing what happened to the dog.
I think it's the hills, no?
Yes, but also we used to do a lot of traveling up and down with the dogs, and I'm very good at conjuring up extremely vivid scenarios, which fortunately don't make it to the pages too often. But then I began to think, what could a lost dog be, and how could this dog become the central motive linking people together in a situation where people are separated by so many kinds of identity and religion and sectarian problems, that an animal would not know any of these problems, and that this dog who goes from person to person would unite them all into one sort of whole. And then I had to, as I kept thinking of it, it was obvious to me that the dog and the potter belonged together, and that was how the book started.
And in fact, not just pottery, there's also calligraphy that's, layered into the pages of what you write.
Yeah.
Were you thinking about the act of creation by hand? I mean, was that something that you wanted to focus on when you were writing the layers that you did?
Yeah. In fact, a lot of the book is really about the act of creating and how it is for the person creating, and how the world responds to it, and how the person making those things views the responses to them, or how it is a completely private passion for him, which at some point has to face the world. Just as when you write a book, right in the first drafts, it's yours alone, and then 2 or 3 years later, suddenly other people are reading it. So that moment is quite a difficult one for me, at least.
Yeah.
Not when you or everybody else is reading it, but the very first time I hand it to somebody else to read it. So I've been thinking about these questions of creativity in relation to myself and to other people and work for a long time. And it was this sense of also of the many obstacles that are before you when you want to make something. So for the potter, it is not only that he has to translate this vision of his, he has to have the skill and imagination and gift, the talent to translate it into reality, but he also faces quite a lot of opposition from the world at large. And when he has this idea of using calligraphy on his horse, he is really responding to calligraphy which he cannot read. He can't read the Urdu. He is responding to it as a beautiful set of designs he's seen on some tombs he's visited in his city. And he wants that on his horse. And also because he's in love with a Muslim woman, he thinks romantically that this Urdu calligraphy will somehow bring them together. But it's the calligrapher who decides to use the words of Kabir, who has a much clearer sense of why he is writing the things he is writing and how he is making that horse from a sacred object into a secular one that sort of, that demonstrates the complete futility of fanaticism of any kind by bringing in the Kabir verse.
Yeah. I want to delve into that in much more detail, but I just want to sidestep for a bit about the point that you made of where the most difficult point of the process is. I mean, for you, one would say your tools are well sharpened. This is not your first work, and you've won so many accolades, well deserved. What for you still is the tough part of the writing process?
It's just that every book comes with so many different kinds of challenges that although you think I've done this many times and for many years, and it ought to get a bit easier, but it doesn't, because each time you feel a sense of, and actually it's a curious thing. It's a bit of a contradiction, because if you don't feel that sense of terror, a kind of vertigo-like feeling, that I really won't be able to do this. This is too much. And how do I knit all this together? How do I reach the end? I don't even know what the end is. And what is the dog going to do? Is he going to live or die? All kinds of things. And if that fear and excitement doesn't hit you from the start and carry you through till the end, I find that I won't usually finish what I'm writing if it's too simple. So that first draft part is definitely the hardest part and also the most exhilarating for me.
And you truly have connected so many dots in the book. That's something that really struck me while reading it. Mm-hmm. You set the book in the 80s, Anuradha, but just the point that you were making about the echoes of what we hear, the communal strife, the undercurrent of tension. It feels very here and now. Was that a conscious decision, or did that just happen while you were writing it? You were writing about the 80s, but so much seems to echo in our present day.
Well, I think that the real difference between the 80s and now in terms of this religious violence kind of thing is that in the 80s, I was in my teens and, late teens. And when we were growing up, it's not as though there was religious harmony at all. I doubt if there ever has been. But right from independence, I think it was something we were aspiring to. It was something that was being drilled into us all the time, that all religions are equal, that you have to respect all of them. And I went to a school in Hyderabad. That's where I grew up. And this school was, in fact, there is a school very like it in the novel, because I felt that school was a kind of crucible for me. It was a Muslim school, not in the sense of teaching religious teaching, but it was run by a Muslim woman called Begum Anis Khan. It was called Nasser. And the school was started as a school to give Muslim girls an education mainly, but it took in children from all religions, girls only. So I went to the school, and we were always conscious of violence possible at any point because it was a Muslim school. So we knew we could be a target at all times. And Hyderabad was very much a city where religious violence occurred in the old city unpredictably at any time, many times. So that has been going on continuously. That's why it feels contemporary. But the difference now is that this ideal of secularism that we aspired to has been swept away by hatred. So that's the difference now, not the presence of religious violence. I think now it's just an actively encouraged part of the landscape.
How did it shape your psyche as a young girl to study in an environment where there was the shadow of that threat, Anuradha? Did you come to fear religion as a concept, or were you more open to the fact that it could have violent shades to it? How did you process all of this? Because it can't have been easy to be studying under the pall of this potential threat of fear.
Well, I wouldn't say it was anything that we were conscious of non-stop daily, but there were times when it could happen unpredictably. So fortunately, when you're young, you also have you're very elastic. You bounce back, you forget, the important things are other things. Yeah. So maybe my parents were non-stop worried about us, but I certainly wasn't. I was very, very happy at that school. And when these things occurred, such as, oh, there's a riot in the old city, you need to get home quickly, it was quite exciting. We would phone someone, somebody's father who had a car would come. It all felt very exciting. We were not aware of it being a threat, that actual people were suffering, and that we could also come to harm. That didn't really occur to us at that age. So I don't think that part of it has, but it certainly now comes back to me as I feel as if people don't know what they are losing by doing what they're doing now, that there was something very precious then, at least the aspiration to being together harmoniously, which is being lost now. And it's this loss that the book really is about, with this horse being the symbol of that loss, the horse with the calligraphy.
Was that a conscious thought while you were writing, Anuradha, that you wanted to really delve into the concept of syncretism? I read one of your previous interviews where you did indicate that it's not really the mandate of of someone writing or literature to really go into this aspect of it. But was that on your mind, the fact that you wanted to bring out the beauty of syncretism?
Not when I started the book. When I started the book, as I said, I only had the potter and his horse and the dog in my mind. And this was sort of going on for quite a long time before I actually got to the point of thinking I need to think what happens around these people. And as I write the book, I discover it for myself. It's not as though I know what is going to. I didn't know at the start that Ilangu would fall in love with a Muslim woman. That came later, and somehow when it came, it was something I couldn't make his life easier by saying, no, let him not love her, but somebody else. And that would have, of course, changed the book completely.
Yeah.
But once she was in his life, then all these other elements began falling into place. She had to have who did she live with? Okay, she lived with this grandfather. What did he do? So this was the way it happened, not by me thinking from the start that I have to write about syncretism, but maybe because that idea is so precious to me, it's something I felt the need to put into the novel. It just, that's probably.
And it appears so beautifully.
Hard to tell.
Yeah, I know, but it appears so beautifully and also in a very subtle fashion. You haven't labored over the point at any juncture, not even when you introduce the character Zohra. It's a very subtle reference to the fact that religious differences exist. Not even, and I don't want to spoil this for someone who hasn't read the book, but not even when it gets to the climactic moment where things really come to a head. Did you consciously hold back? You didn't want it to be as violent or as disturbing as it can be when you're talking about this kind of religious flashpoint?
I really didn't want it to become a book about religious violence. That would be the whole thing in the book. I didn't want that to happen. I wanted the book to be about this potter and his imagination and the fire and passion in him as he creates something, and what this kind of artist faces in wanting to do these quite simple things, which is to make the thing he wants to make and love the woman he wants to love, and how the world around can make these supposedly simple things very complicated. But I didn't want it to become some kind of, violent, sensational thing. I think understatement work can work much better very often, at least for me when I'm reading. I think understatement and silences work better for me. So I think you do aspire to write what you love to read on the whole.
It's also, it's these large parts against the other of, religious differences, but it's also the individual against a larger whole. Was that, were you channeling your own artist and your own feelings into the potter when you wrote about how it was? Because for him, the whole act of creating things is very different from what the outside world wants from him, or what his brother wants from him. They're like in two different universes.
Yeah, well, I think through various characters in the book, including Sarah is the girl who is the narrator, and including her friend Karen, who is in England, where they are studying together. It's really about individuals facing different sets of circumstances, and they can keep changing. For Sarah, they keep changing. She's quite the amphibian who goes through, who can move through classes, places, people, and animals. And each circumstance presents her with a different set of things that she might find she has to survive. In England, she has to survive racism, for example. And so does Karen. And Karen is also coping with sexual confusion about her identity. And Ilango has this whole set of creative puzzles that he's trying to sort out in his mind very often. And I'm sure that both my own feelings about making things, as well as those of, if you're a potter, you're part of quite a big community of potters. If you're a writer, also you are. So you're aware of so many conversations, conflicts, problems all the time among people around you as well as your own. And those things were definitely, Ilango became a kind of receptacle for putting all these thoughts into.
Ilango also fights romanticism that may be associated with, with all these various threads, because, that line struck me where he says, for my child, I hope he doesn't become a potter and I hope he is an atheist. It's a sign that it hasn't been easy, whether it is an intercultural marriage or whether it is to pick a profession like this. Was that something as well that you wanted to bring out, saying, it's not all roses and flowers?
Yeah, absolutely. Because he's I found him, although, there's a point at which after the book is finished that the character, I've written him, okay, but I find him quite fascinating as a person. Even though I know I've written him, I feel as if he has an existence quite independent of me. And I love this about him, that he has all this passion and romance and fire inside him, that he falls in love in this absolutely precipitous way, in a way he can't get out of. He can't talk himself out of it. And yet he is very, very clear-eyed about many things. And he, as you say, it doesn't end with some sort of, roses and blue skies, but it doesn't, he isn't someone who gives up on the whole thing either. He's quite fierce about reaching the point he wants to reach and about making it happen, what he wants to happen. So I really love this guy, actually. Despite having, it's quite a,
I'm
it's
sure
true that when you meet him in the end, you might feel that he is he's been through a lot. So that has shown on his body and mind, of course.
Sure, there is an Elango somewhere in the Deccan region who's probably going
Yeah.
to read this and say, "This is me. This is my life. It's been tough, but
Yeah,
it's been worth it."
absolutely. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, tell me.
no, no,
Sorry,
no.
I
Please,
was
please go
interrupting.
ahead.
No, I was just, it's absolutely random. I'll tell you later. So
Okay.
you carry on with the question.
I
Yeah.
just wanted to pivot to the writing process and just the
Yeah.
larger picture for you. First up, do you feel comfortable with when people use the term women writers or woman writer for you, or is that something you think is an unnecessary sub classification?
Oh, that it just makes me, I'm not normally a very hot-tempered person, but this, yeah, it irritates me really deeply. It makes me feel infuriated, that it just goes on and on.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that whenever whenever a woman writes a book, of course, she's called a woman writer, and regardless of what the book contains.
Yeah.
For example, even about this book, some interviewers have asked me, well, the book has a central, strong woman character. The central character is definitely not a woman. It's the potter who's a man.
Yeah.
And I have no problem writing strong women characters. My books have many strong women characters, but there is a really infuriating tendency to both slot women as women writers, as if they are not part of the whole big world of writing, which also contains men who are treated completely differently when they write something.
Yeah.
And also this whole business of, if you are a woman, you must be writing about women, regardless of what themes or characters your book contains. So these are two things that it's all a part of the whole business of, which things like people like Kamila Shamsi and so on have written many times about. The whole ecosystem of literature being published, not just in India, but elsewhere, where women's writing is reviewed less, women win fewer prizes. However equal the whole world seems to be becoming, especially in the elite spaces, these are things that persist. It's changing a little bit now. Now you see many more, women in shortlists and women's novels being reviewed and so on. But you don't want to be in a kind of special seat for the, gender challenged or something. You want to be just a writer, not a woman writer, of course.
It's almost like it's easier to put people in those pockets. I think it would be similar for the LGBTQIA community, right? When something comes out, is it gay literature? Let's put it in the gay literature slot.
Yeah. There was this very hilarious time when we published a book by Sheila Dhar. And she had titled it, later it was called Here's Someone I'd Like You to Meet. But earlier on, she had entitled it One Green Chili and the Music People. And every marketing person told her they would shelve it in the recipes section. And so she should just avoid, woman, chili equals cookbook. So they wouldn't know it was about music at all.
We were talking before we started the interview, Anuradha, about how difficult this year and a half, now 2 years almost, has been for the performing arts community.
Yeah.
There's been little to no performances. The performances that happen seem to come with the expectation that you should be valued at zero. ये तो आप free में कर रहे हो, इससे आप audience मिलेगा. How has it been for the writing community? I mean, have there been more people coming together and supporting each other? Because writing itself is such a lonely process. It is isolating in a sense when you go into your book. Was it different for your art form, and I call it an art form, versus the other?
Yeah. I'm not a very public person in the sense of belonging to a writing community. People who have actually done creative writing courses, people who belong to workshops, they are much more accustomed to and tuned to, say, sharing their work in progress. I maybe I'm losing out, but I've never done that kind of thing, and I find it a deeply secretive process, in fact, for me when I'm writing a book. So all I want is isolation. I don't show it to anybody, not even to friends who want to read one chapter or two until the whole book is finished, the first draft. I want to be left alone. So in that sense, I think we were the least affected professionally among people in terms of the actual work we are doing. But the rest of it, which is, like when a book is published, for example, my last book, the French translation of it, came out exactly more or less the week that the pandemic hit in Europe. Not so much here, but in April last year, when Italy was being swept by deaths and so on. So that's when the French released the book. And it was a terrible time to release a book. Nobody could go to a shop. Nobody knew how to deal with things in the way we know now, in a sense. We've learned through all our misfortunes, but at that time we didn't know a thing. So it affected people, writers, depending on which stage they were at in their writing. And I think it's been a problem for all of us to just be out for our research, for gathering stories, for simply meeting people who feed you with, ideas. That I miss a great deal. Yeah.
What's also happened in the last couple of years, and this is not about the pandemic, Anuradha, is, to go back to your point about syncretism and what you've written, the creative arts community has really sort of come under a very harsh light. And they're split down the middle. There is one side that is speaking very vocally for issues that they are against hate, against majoritarianism. And then there's another part that is very vociferously defending it. Is this something you've seen before? And how comfortable do you feel with the idea of, taking a stand? Or do you believe that, no one should be pushed into taking a stand? Or conversely, do you feel that these are the voices that do matter, and when they speak up, perhaps it does make an impact?
Well, I really admire the people who do take a stand, some of them at great risk to their physical lives, forget about their working lives or their earning or, everything. But the danger now is very real to your physical. I remember quite some years ago, one of our authors telling me about actually being beaten in a police line during a student protest, which was not now, it was many years ago. Because these things, of course, have been happening for many years. We tend to forget that this is not new, this is very old. And so the whole business of taking sides, I think, came to me very sharply when I was just out of college and Babri Masjid came down. And when you took it for granted that everybody you knew would find it horrifying and appalling that this happened, that was the first time I realized I was, that that was a delusion, that there were many people you knew too personally who actually thought it was not a bad thing at all, and that some kind of ancient justice was being done. So this business of taking a stand has been gathering steam and has reached a kind of head at the moment where you feel you're being asked to do it on a daily basis, on the simplest and smallest of things, to writing a book. And then once you've written the book, of course, you want it to be read. And at the same time, you're in this situation where you would rather it were not really noticed, in the sense that you don't want it to get the wrong kind of reader. So it's a horrible situation to be in if you're writing, to be having all these things in your head as well, other than just wanting to get the writing done as well as you possibly can. You always feel, in some senses, not brave enough, not strong enough. If whichever side you're on, you feel that, who is saying what, who is giving in to the bullies, who is standing up to them, who are these bullies, and can a friend suddenly turn into a bully. All these things create a kind of intense sense of pressure on everybody, I think, not just on writers, but in daily situations of having to respond to things.
No, I hear you. I think, as you pointed out earlier, that's the big difference of the last few years, that the veneer of putting up appearances perhaps is off. So the masks are off. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. I guess we'll find out down the line. I want to wind down with asking you what you're reading these days, because it's always fascinating to hear what someone who writes is reading and what they're absorbing and enjoying. What are you?
Well, I'm actually reading I've just started it. I'm maybe 50 pages in, and it's a novel by Madeline Miller. I think it won the Orange Prize. It's called The Song of Achilles.
Oh.
And my nephew, who's suddenly grown up and become an adult, he's now 19.
The one who chipped in with a lot of research in your acknowledgement.
Yes. Yeah. So my nephew sent me this book for my birthday. And he reads intensely arcane stuff. He reads all kinds. He's taught himself Urdu, and he reads, he sort of goes through Greek mythology and Icelandic sagas and Hindu mythology, all together. It's all a huge, big library in his head. And he picked out this Song of Achilles, which is told by Patroclus, who is in love with Achilles as a young boy in the book. And it's a love that grows very slowly. And Patroclus has murdered someone by mistake as a child. He's just thrown him down, and that boy has died, the other boy. So he's been disowned and exiled. Although he's a prince, he's living as a commoner in the palace of Achilles. And the whole book is such an incredible imagining of the world of the Iliad, but from a completely different perspective, from someone who is in there and who's feeling things and experiencing a sexual awakening, which he bewilders him. He doesn't know what's happening. So it's a riveting, beautifully written, gorgeous book. That's what I'm reading.
Wow, it sounds absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Anuradha. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you, and many congratulations again.
Oh, thank you.
Beauty.
Thank you for your wonderful questions.
Not at all. And I hope everyone who's watching gets a copy of it, and you keep writing as beautifully as you do. And hopefully at some time in the future, this conversation can happen with us in person rather than by a video.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? Yeah.
It would indeed. It would indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thanks so much. You too.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.